In today's video, we have some updated trade talk around Kevin Hayes being on the move this offseason, as well as Ducks goaltender John Gibson. Plus, could we see a longtime Montreal Canadian captain return to the Habs this offseason as a UFA? Plus, we also have some significant updates on the Ottawa Senators sale, some big injury returns, and a big signing for the Sens as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here, Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to talk about today. Before we jump into the news, though, I just want to take a moment and take a look back at this day in hockey history. It's a pretty significant day. Back in 1994, all those years ago, Wayne Gretzky, the great one, became the all-time leader in goals in NHL history, surpassing Gordie Howe when he hit goal number 802. So certainly a big moment. I know we're probably getting closer and closer all the time to that record being eclipsed by Alexander Ovechkin, who's closing in on Wayne Gretzky's record. Probably, but the way projections look right now, I'd have to say sometime in the next probably 24 months. I'm going to say around March, April 2025. Maybe sooner, you never know. That likely would be around the time that Ovi is going to be closing in or ready to pass that all-time record, which is quite an accomplishment. Hard to say that we'll ever see it again in our lifetime, but you just never know. We do have some pretty prolific guys scoring goals at quite a pace in today's NHL. We also seen a bit of history last night as well. Sidney Crosby, of course, one of the all-time greats, so already in that conversation, even though he's still actively playing, became the first player in NHL history to have a 30-goal season as an 18-year-old and to do it again at age 35. That's quite an accomplishment all those years apart. So in the 05-06 season, when he was 18 and a rookie, he scored 39 goals. And then last night, he notched goal number 30 against the Colorado Avalanche. So certainly, a long, successful career for Sidney Crosby. Still only 35 years old, still has a few years under contract before we have to even wonder if he's going to keep playing. Will he extend? Will he stay in Pittsburgh? All those questions we'll have to see, but that's still a couple of years away before we have to really dive into that. We had some news from the NHL waiver wire today. Not something you see very much this time of year, but the Toronto Maple Leafs have defenseman Carl Dahlstrom on waivers. Now, Dahlstrom's a name you're probably familiar with, but he hasn't played this year. He's been on season opening injured reserve since training camp. Has been out all year, so he's now getting healthy and is ready to return. So, of course, he has to go through waivers, so they can even send him down to the Marlies. I would suspect a player like Dahlstrom, without playing this year, is most likely not going to be picked up, although he could be. But since, it's unlikely to happen, he's most likely going to go down and assist the Marlies with the American Hockey League, the rest of the regular season. But obviously not a lot of time left. He's been out all year, wants to get some games in, and that's going to be required to be part of the process. Now, we had some pretty significant injury updates as well today, some good, some not so good. In Washington, John Carlson makes his triumphant return to the lineup tonight. That's going to be a welcome addition, as that team certainly is in the battle, for a playoff spot. The Caps and the Penguins are both in serious danger of missing the playoffs, and it's quite possible that one, maybe both, if another team gets on enough, could push them out. I mean, they're in a battle basically with the New York Islanders and the Florida Panthers for those last two spots. There are teams like Buffalo and Ottawa that are still kind of knocking at the door, but there's a big enough gap there that it's going to be almost, I wouldn't say impossible, but way harder for them to close it and to confirm that they're going to be taking a spot. It's unlikely at this point, but the Islanders are holding their ground, and then, of course, the Panthers are right there. Between those four teams, two of them will likely get in, and two of them won't. But the Washington and Pittsburgh could be both in danger, get Carlson back after missing 36 games. Like I said, it will be a welcome addition. The Montreal Canadiens welcome back centerman Jake Evans to their lineup tonight, and the Minnesota Wild get captain Jared Spurgeon back as well after missing their previous game. A couple of updates on the Senators. We get word from Pierre Dorian today that Parker Kelly, who's been injured, we found out a little bit more about what he's dealing with. Apparently he's dealing with a broken kneecap, which could keep him out for some time. So hard to say if he'll play again this year. Cam Talbot and Matthew Joseph will start to skate next week. We don't know exactly what timelines are, but he did say that Joseph is closer to returning more likely to play before Talbot, but Talbot still seems like he's a little bit ways away before he can make that return. So with the Ottawa Senators goaltending situation the way it is, of course, they've had Kevin Mandolese go back and forth. Matt Sogard has been with the NHL club for some time. And of course, they signed Dylan Ferguson, who they picked up from the Marlies for future considerations. Had a game of his life the other night against the Pittsburgh Penguins. We're curious to see how he does on his next start. I'm not sure if he's playing tonight against Tampa or if Sogard will go tonight. Maybe he'll get the next one. But they've also recalled or reassigned Levi Merilainen, who's another strong contender for goalie of the future. Merilainen, I think, will certainly give Sogard some competition for that title. He was one of the top goalies in the Finnish league. He had 8 shutouts this season. Phenomenal year for him. He's now being recalled to go to the American Hockey League Belleville Senators. So between Merilainen and Mandolese, they can certainly secure things at the American Hockey League level because they're going to likely need Ferguson and Sogard at the NHL level for some time until Talbot can make the return. We do know that Anton Forsberg is definitely done for the season. Now, the Columbus Blue Jackets are also sending one of their top prospects, Cole Sillinger, down to the American Hockey League. He's had a tough season. The Jackets as a whole have had a tough year. And I think the general consensus here is they kind of want him to go down to the American Hockey League with Cleveland, have a bigger role, have more responsibility, and help them for their regular season push here to finish strong and hopefully have a longer playoff run. And hopefully he can get a confidence boost and kind of do some serious developing down there in a bigger role. And hopefully he can come back stronger and be ready to go take on a bigger role with the Jackets next season. Also back to Ottawa with a couple of updates here. A significant signing. They've inked Tyler Kleven, who's one of their top defensive prospects, again out of the University of North Dakota. He's the 4th player in the past couple of years that they've signed out of UND. There's been a long-running joke that they should be called the UND Senators because of all the draft picks that they've had go there. Obviously, Jacob Bernard-Docker, one of the first, and then, of course, in the past year, we've seen Shane Pinto and now Jake Sanderson sign and, of course, play full-time now with the Senators. And now Tyler Kleven is next on that list. He signs his 3-year entry-level contract. He will join the Senators right away. There's barely been no promise that he will play NHL games this year. I suspect he'll likely practice with the Senators for probably the next few days at the very least. And then I guess after a couple more games, if things are looking less likely that they're going to have a chance to go to the playoffs or if they're eliminated, then I would imagine the last few games of the year, they'll likely let him get his feet wet and get a few games under his belt. But Kleven was a 2020 draft pick, along with Shane Pinto. Obviously, that draft class is looking mighty strong right now. Kleven is a big, rangy defenseman, 6'4", 200+ pounds. Shoots the puck really well. More of a stay-at-home type defender, but he can move the puck well and is a really good hitter, is what people say. He's a real good physical defenseman back there, which is, as Pierre Dorian put it, a really different type of defenseman that they don't already have. So he brings a whole different element back there, and they're real happy to get Kleven signed and under contract. I'll be curious to see when he makes his NHL debut. Now, some big updates on the Ottawa Senators sale. And it's been a hot topic here, and it's been different news updates coming out on it pretty much every day as it seems lately. But we got some more big updates here today. For starters, the mayor of Ottawa, Mark Sutcliffe, had made some comments saying that he would not rule out the possibility of public funding being involved in the new Senators downtown arena. He also went on to say that LeBreton Flats is not necessarily the only spot where they could put a new arena, and that there might be other locations that might even possibly be better. I've heard some people say recently that the size of the land in LeBreton that's going to be available for this is maybe not big enough, or at least big to the point that the new ownership group would like. Obviously, I'm sure all the different prospective ownership groups have looked at this, that they might want a bigger parcel of land to not only have the arena, but to do some other developments around it, and that it might not be the most ideal location. It's not exactly right in the heart of downtown, and that they might want something a little bit more central, a little bit easier for people in the downtown area to get to on foot, and that there's some other areas that he mentioned that could very well work that are currently city-owned as well, which would obviously end up with the city and the new ownership group negotiating on a sale of said piece of land if they decide to go down that road. Now, when it comes to public funding, I don't really see a scenario where the city actually funds part of the the actual cost of the arena. To me, they're likely going to either that public funding will come in the form of development of like the roads and infrastructure, maybe around that way on the land for the arena. Perhaps they do a deal, give them a price break on the piece of land to build the arena, something to that effect. I don't think it's going to be a substantial amount. All the groups that are rumored to be in the running to buy the team have deep enough pockets to definitely fund this privately. So I don't think there's really going to be any concerns that way. But one thing that we also heard today, and this comes from Brent Wallace, former TSN reporter, and has had a Senators-based podcast now for a few years. Currently, it's under the Nation Network, which is owned part of the ownership group of DailyFaceoff.com, which he works with Jason York and Bobby Ryan, two former Sens players. They were talking with us today, and he had a lot of, well-connected source tell him that the group that's led by Nico Sparks, who's Nico apparently already has some connections to the Senators. He's always a tech person, wealthy tech person. That and his group apparently does have some pretty well-known celebrity involved and that are willing to be investors with this group. He's also backed by the Rubin family, which is the second wealthiest, I should say, family out of the UK, and they own a soccer team there, football, I guess, in Europe, which is Newcastle United FC. So obviously he has wealthy backings that way, and the celebrities that are rumored to be involved include musician The Weeknd, who of course is Canadian and from Ontario, and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. If you smell The Rock is cooking, it sounds like he's rumored to be involved as being a big celebrity hit involved with this group as well. Obviously, The Rock's net worth is believed to be somewhere around $800 million. He's obviously made a ton of money with all the TV, movies, and everything he's produced, as well as a former wrestling career on his own. So certainly a well-connected person who could certainly be big for marketing as well. And it's also believed that The Rock, of course, we know, certainly knows Ryan Reynolds well. It's believed that they're fairly close friends. Of course, they've worked together in different projects. So no secret there that it's believed that if Ryan Reynolds' group that he's working with is not the successful bidder here, that he could easily be lured over to be a part of that. And then maybe Reynolds and The Rock could both be involved in this, a minority stake in this ownership group, which could be huge for the marketing of the team. Now, another connection as well is their hockey advisor, which a lot of these groups have hockey advisors, given that that's not their main area specialty, is Mattias Nordstrom. If you don't know that name, he's a former NHL player from Sweden, former captain of the Los Angeles Kings, and he is really good friends and well connected to Daniel Alfredsson. So lots of connections with this group, even though when it was first revealed that this group had the highest bid and that they, that there's lots of, things about them that wasn't really all that well known. But now that we know more about them, I think this bid needs to be taken a lot more seriously. It could be a lot more interesting than I ever imagined when the news first broke on who they were without knowing more about them. So that could be substantial if all these different parties are involved in owning a stake of this franchise. So we'll have to see, be real curious to see how this unfolds. Now, as I mentioned in the trade section of the video today, part of this is going to be a UFA rumor, and the other part is a trade rumor. Now, Dave Pagnotta on the fourthperiod.com today has an article where he confirms that, according to his sources, Kevin Hayes to the Blue Jackets is pretty much already agreed upon and is likely going to go down sometime early in the offseason, or at least by the NHL draft. There were reports before that Hayes thought he might be a buyout candidate by the Flyers. Either way, it seems like they definitely would like to move on from the player in the contract. Columbus emerged as a potential destination for him around the time of the NHL trade deadline. Unfortunately, things never materialized at that point, but Pagnotta confirms that the Flyers are likely going to retain somewhere around 33% of the remaining salary on Hayes' contract for the last few years, and that he would be traded with that retention to the Jackets in exchange for not much of anything. And the return is going to be minimal at this point. At this point, the Jackets are basically doing the Flyers a favor and taking on a contract. They really need help at the center position. Obviously, Hayes is a veteran player, well connected to Johnny Gaudreau, former college teammates, good friends, had good chemistry at that level all those years back. So I'll be curious to see how things work out. So fully suspect that Hayes will move on from the Flyers this offseason, which won't come as a big surprise after everything we've heard from the Jackets and Flyers rumors that have been circulating really since, like I said, a couple of weeks before the NHL deadline. So we'll have to see. It's hard to say exactly when that deal is expected to go down. He's not going to be the only member of the Flyers that's moved. We've talked about speculation on Carter Hart recently. I suspect a player like Ivan Provorov is possible to go as well. Wouldn't completely rule out Travis Konechny, but again, a player like Konechny, they're not going to trade him just for the sake of trading him. They're only going to do it if they get the right value, and obviously a good piece that'll help them for the future. I mean, Konechny's young enough that they could decide to keep him around. Still, it's hard to say. Provorov has been rumored to be, needing a first start or wanting a first start. The team has felt that way as well, according to different rumors, for some time. So it might be something we finally see come to be. So we'll keep our eye on that, but expect Hayes to the Jackets. And also to an NHL.com article by Dan Rosen talking about John Gibson in Anaheim and the possibility of him finally moving on from the Anaheim Ducks this offseason. Now, it's been well known that Anaheim probably would prefer to move Gibson. It doesn't make sense for them to have a more expensive veteran goaltender under contract like he is when they're going through this rebuild. It doesn't really make sense for him to waste away his prime years with a weak rebuilding team in front of him when he could have the opportunity to maybe move on to a more competitive team. Well, according to Dan Rosen, the teams that he would suspect would be most likely to trade for Gibson would be the Pittsburgh Penguins or possibly the Buffalo Sabres. Now, the Penguins are going to be a team I think would make a lot of sense for Gibson. We don't know what they're planning to do with unrestricted free agent goaltender Tristan Jarry, since they hung on to him and he is not signed. If the regular season does not end well and they miss the playoffs, or if they go to the playoffs and they're out early, and if Jerry doesn't play well, I would suspect that they're probably not going to re-sign him, and they're going to be looking for his replacement. Now, I'm not sure about Casey DeSmith. He might still be around for a little while, but if Jerry departs, he could be one of the more interesting goalies on the free agent market. And then, of course, we could have, in case of John Gibson, maybe making his way to the Penguins. Of course, the Penguins and the Ducks have done other trades before. I think Gibson would welcome a trade to that area. Obviously, a chance to be more competitive, and I think it makes a lot of sense. When it comes to Buffalo, hard to say what they're going to do with their goaltending there. There's some rumors that they might consider trading Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Of course, they still have Craig Anderson and Eric Comrie. I don't know what their future holds. I think Anderson likely either retires or moves on. Comrie, hard to say. Then, of course, there's Devin Levi. And between Levi and Luukkonen, Levi's not going anywhere. He's the goalie of the future. I don't know how quickly they want to thrust him into trying to be a number one goalie. I would suspect not super quick, that they want to give him time and develop. Maybe he's a backup next year. I don't know if they expect him to do any time in the American Hockey League. I think they'll probably want to wait and see how it goes. So it's hard to say what the Sabres do, but if they want to go with either Levi and a veteran guy, and maybe that veteran guy is not Comrie or Anderson, then maybe a Gibson trade makes sense. Sabres have done a really good job of loading up on prospects and stuff and picks, so I think they would have some interesting assets that would intrigue the Ducks, so I wouldn't completely rule them out. Now, there's other teams, too, that would also make sense that could be questionable. Like, look at Carolina, for example. We don't know what they're doing with their goaltending next year. Between Anderson and Ranta, there's going to be some openings there. They have Kochetkov, obviously, too, so they may not want to trade for a guy like Gibson, but, Gibson and Kochetkov together, if Anderson and Ranta both move on, could be a possibility, I guess. And there could be other teams, too, that join that mix, so don't be shocked if John Gibson has moved this offseason. Now, on a UFA rumor, could Max Pacioretty return to Montreal? That's the question looked upon here in the Montreal Hockey Now article by Mark Dumont, looking at that possibility, looking at some veteran forwards that they could bring in to help with scoring next year. He mentions Pacioretty and others as a potential target. Now, of course, Pacioretty currently with the Carolina Hurricanes, basically was traded from Vegas to Carolina for nothing, and basically played almost none this year, given the fact that he hurt his Achilles tendon in the offseason, missed 6 months, came back and only played a handful of games, re-injured again, done for the season. So certainly he's, I guess what you could call damaged goods. The price tag on Pacioretty is going to fall dramatically. After making $7 million per season, you know that he's going to have to be able to take a contract a lot less than that next year. I don't know if the Carolina Hurricanes are going to want to re-sign him or try to after, all the injuries he's dealt with this year. So we don't know how that's going to go. Certainly, he's quite likely going to be looking for work. Now, Montreal is a place he's very familiar with, but of course, things ended on really not so great terms with Pacioretty and the Canadiens, but it was the previous regime. It really was Marc Bergevin who was at the helm there. I don't know if Pacioretty would be comfortable returning there. I mean, it was really weird, really awkward, the way things ended. I don't know, man. I think it's a bit of a long shot, and I can see the possibility, depending on how many other veterans that Montreal was able to move on from in the offseason, because they do have some expiring contracts, and there are some others that could be dealt. Does it really make sense to bring back Max Pacioretty with the health that he's been dealing with over the past year plus? I mean, even the year before, he didn't miss the whole season, but he missed significant chunks. I don't know, man. It's an interesting thought. It's intriguing. There's always the nostalgia factor. Habs fans may or may not like the idea, the concept. When a Max Pacioretty is a UFA this offseason, which is likely going to be the case, would you, if Montreal, if you're a Habs fan, could sign him at a discounted price because of his injury history, would that be something you'd want to see? Let me know your thoughts on that and everything else discussed today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.